Sammie's like Batman when he goes into that cave and he's like with all those bats that are like his worst fear, and then he comes out as Batman. That's Sammie. She's Bird Woman at the end of this.
I really don't want to be Bird Woman.
Oh, wake up, rethink the status quo. When you get your money right, then you're the one who runs your life. Come build a wealthy spirit with Sammie and Michelle.
Imagine you're at a pool. You see the highest diving board and think, I'm gonna jump off that thing. So you go to the ladder and you start climbing, one step in front of the other. You're going up and up. You look to the side. You notice it's a little high, but you keep going. You get to the top. You feel the cold, moist board against your feet as you walk to the edge and you look out and you realize you're pretty high. You thought you were prepared, but it's scary. That's what it can feel like to start to plan a sabbatical, taking time off, taking a leave of absence from your job, or in cases like mine, you get shoved off when you're let go of your job.
It does sound scary, Michelle. It sounds so scary. In fact, jumping off a diving board in general also sounds scary.
Sammie's not a fan of heights.
Not a fan.
I'm not a fan of diving into water. But alas, that is a metaphor. Something Sammie and I have noticed is that we are talking to a lot of our friends. We're talking to a lot of you all out in the build a wealthy spirit world.
A lot of enlightened beings.
A lot of enlightened beings. And people are starting to think about taking a little bit of time off work. Whether that's our all-encompassing term, taking a sabbatical, aka time off, whether that's paid or unpaid, a leave, maternity leave. Some people are getting laid off right now. They're being pushed out of the workforce, but also thinking, hey, maybe I want to extend this a little bit. And we have a very interesting perspective on it because I have personally taken a sabbatical. Technically, I left the corporate world 2.5 years ago. I would say 2 of those were a proper not working sabbatical. I'm still in that mindset, but I do technically work a little bit. And Sammie is thinking about it. So we wanted to take a look at the art and science of planning a sabbatical because as crazy as it sounds, it can be a little bit like stepping on the edge of that diving board, looking out, and then realizing, oh shoot, it's time to jump.
As somebody who's trying to plan her sabbatical, it does feel like jumping off a diving board. Is it safe? Is it okay? Is it the right thing to do? There's so many questions going through my brain right now. And luckily, I have an experienced Sabbati, my sister, Michelle, to help me out. Let's get into it.
But before that, Sammie, I do want to talk a little bit about a company that we are loving right now, Daily Harvest. Keep in mind, here at Build a Wealthy Spirit, Sammie and I, we do love to take a look at our lives and say, are there ways that we can be living a healthier existence? Mm-hmm. And sometimes we're veering off into fast food world and we want to take ourselves back to eating healthy. Daily Harvest, we found, has been that light at the end of the tunnel for us. They have organic fruits and vegetables, smoothies, bowls, flatbreads, different foods like butternut squash soup or a cherry almond smoothie that perfectly accompany our diet.
Michelle, they are delicious. In fact, I've been noticing I'm feeling a lot better now that we're eating whole, real foods. And we went to McDonald's last week and my body said no to that. Let's just say that. So if you're looking for something healthy to eat, we highly recommend Daily Harvest. Let's eat better together. Click the link in our show notes to get $65 off your first box of Daily Harvest.
Let's get back into it. So Sammie and I are talking about one of my favorite topics today, which is sabbaticals. I think there's so much beauty in being able to take a little bit of time off, clear your head, enjoy life. It's something that I've had the opportunity to do and I think is so amazing. And I would love to be able to empower more people to do it as well.
Michelle and I came across this piece which discusses how to plan for your sabbatical, which I was super interested in because I'm trying to plan it right now and it's just a lot of moving pieces. This piece in Forbes is called Taking a Sabbatical, 16 Coaches on How to Maximize the Time Off.
I was really excited about this piece, Sammie, because we were chatting a little bit about what are some good ways to start thinking about taking some time off. And I think as we chat a little bit more about this piece in Forbes, our readers are going to notice that it's a little bit of a different thinking than we typically have. A little bit of a jobby mindset, which surprised me.
It's almost like no wonder we had to create a podcast episode about it because the information out there can be very jobby mindset. Jobby mindset, and they're talking about a sabbatical, a leave from work. It almost doesn't make sense, but sometimes it can be that hard to let go of the idea of a job when you're thinking.
Yeah, there were multiple suggestions in this piece that said things like, check in with your colleagues. What? Meet with your key stakeholders.
The one I loved, Michelle, was the one that said, determine what skills and experience your organization needs before taking a sabbatical.
Oh gosh, this is everything I think that's problematic with the whole mindfulness and we care about you movement in the corporate world is this idea that everything you do, including taking time off of work, is meant to make you a better worker. And so we didn't agree with things like that because honestly, we think a sabbatical, the definition in its purest form to us, is leaving the corporate work behind, unlearning those habits. And that's really what we're going to delve in today because we think that when you're on your sabbatical, you don't need to check in with nobody, let alone your old colleagues. It's like they thought they needed to tell everybody to have work anxiety.
I agree, Michelle. I mean, I understand some people's sabbaticals are paid for by their work, and maybe in those situations, you need some sort of preface about what you're going to think about when you're on the sabbatical, but still, it was just a little too heavy on the jobby mindset.
I think even if you were taking a sabbatical from work, I think that's really nice. And I think that's actually common in places like Europe where they actually have like multi-month sabbaticals that people can take off. But I don't know if the encouragement should be check in because at that point, what's the point? And even like if you have the opportunity to take work off, even if it's not even the best circumstances, like I know some tech companies, like my old company offered people a couple months off leave if they were willing to take time off while they were trying to move through the rough parts of the economy. And I think the whole point is that you don't have to worry about like a book of business or clients or whether or not the organization is going to fall apart while you're gone. Because here's the thing, it's not. And our listeners, I think, are smarter than that. This is not the mindset that we're in or we think you're in either.
I agree, Michelle.
So something, Sammie, that we've been talking about is that you're planning your own sabbatical. And one thing I'm curious to know about is what are some of the blockers to actually taking time off? Like, why aren't you leaving your workplace tomorrow?
Oh, Michelle, it's hard for me to even say that I'm taking a sabbatical or that I'm even thinking about taking a sabbatical. It's just a difficult concept to verbalize, even though I think it would be really good for me. But blockers, I have many. One big blocker that I think about is paying for things in general and also paying for my student loans.
Oh, yeah. Money, go figure, is a big one.
Yes, money on so many levels is a big factor. I think about paying for my student loans, even though technically if I'm on sabbatical and I'm not getting paid, then I think I can do like an income-based payment and not have to pay during that time period. But still, it can feel anxious to have that looming over me. And I'll also be pausing my student loan forgiveness because if I'm not working, then I'm not having more months that count to being forgiven. So in a way, there's a part of me that feels like, oh, you're prolonging that process.
Yes, Sammie, I think student loan or any kind of debt is a big thing to think about. It's important to think about, like when you take time off work and you don't have a paycheck coming in, what are the bills that you're going to still have to pay?
And also, I think about my job. I don't hate my job. Of a lot of the jobs that I've had, this is a pretty decent job. I definitely get paid well. I have an anxiety that I'll never get paid this much ever again, not to manifest ill on myself, but I think I know that I'm in a really lucky position right now, and it's hard to imagine getting that lucky again, I guess.
Sammie, I love that you said that because I think it's very common to have a scarcity mindset when you're thinking about leaving your work. No matter how much you enjoy your job, I think it's very hard to think, will I have an opportunity like this again? Whether it's pay, whether it's the team that you're leaving. But I'm assuming for people who are considering a break, there is a reason they're unhappy. Like if your work life is so perfect, you love everybody you're working with, you are making great money, like I'm assuming at that point you don't want to leave. So it's one of those things where it's like we're so afraid to leave something good because we're afraid we're going to take a break and we're not going to be able to have an opportunity to replace the great quote unquote job in our life.
You bring up a great point, Michelle, because I hear a lot of healthcare workers talk about leaving the workplace and they're always like, oh, my job was so good. I loved helping people. I love what I did. I found so much purpose in it, but I had to do this other thing. And then it's kind of like, really, why did you leave? It was so great. And I have to be honest with myself. I'm like, there's a lot of things I like about my job, but there's also a lot of things I don't like about my job. It's not so great. If it was so great, I wouldn't consider leaving. So you're absolutely correct with that. There is a fear that I won't find a situation as good, but if I'm being honest with myself, do I think it's the best situation in the world? No, and it's nothing to do with my specific job. It's just in general this type of work.
Exactly, Sammie. And something that I've realized now that I've taken time off work is I think that when we've been in one situation for so long, like for example, you've been a physician assistant with the same hours, the same setup more or less for almost a decade, it's so hard for us to imagine an alternate reality. Like the life I have right now, I did not predict. I was leaving a 40-hour-a-week sales job where I had health insurance, a boss, coworkers, and now I do freelance work. I help people with communities that I'm a part of. I get to almost apprentice, like people that I really admire, and it's so enjoyable to me. But I literally didn't even know this existed when I left my work. And had I planned for it, I would have planned something a lot more lackluster. It probably would have been a sales job, but just with better hours or something.
I agree, Michelle. I mean, when I hear you say that, I think about me, and I'm such a checkboxer, and being a PA is something you can totally checkbox yourself into. Like, it's like, first go to undergrad, take these classes, get these grades, do these healthcare service hours, go to PA school, look for a job after PA school. It's very organized. It's very clear cut. You know what you have to do. And imagining a reality where I'm going to take a break and then just see what happens, it's so difficult for me to even imagine letting go that much.
Checkboxer is such a good term for it, Sammie. I feel like we made this podcast for checkboxers by checkboxers, because we relate to that so hard. I will say, if you want one box to check, the one thing I always ask people right off the bat if they're talking to me about either leaving their work or if they just left their job and they're thinking about taking a sabbatical, the question is always, how long will your money last? Do you know? Have you looked at your numbers, your savings, your checkings, your investments? Because at the end of the day, you need to know, like, how long can I live without making an income? And the reality is that if you need a paycheck tomorrow, I imagine we'll want to look for a job. I know I would, because I'm not so risk averse that I can be so close to my last dollar without having anxiety. And so we have a whole episode for finding your financial runway, which I'll include in the show notes. But I don't want to pretend like you should just go willy-nilly and not know your finances. Like we talk so much about personal finance. Assuming you're anything like us in terms of your risk aversion and your desire for security, I do think that's one box to check. Figure out how long your money will last you. You will feel so much better because you'll know what steps to take after that.
That makes total sense, Michelle. And you know I'm a money nerd, but I'll be honest, I've been hesitant to look at the numbers. Yes.
What?
I did look at them today since we talked about it.
I know, you were like, is the market up? I was like, what are you looking at right now?
Yes, I did look at the numbers today. And I think another thing that's really difficult is when I was tracking my spending back when I was living in the Bay Area, I was never spending more than like $20,000 a year. I was spending usually much less than that.
Whoa. When you were living at home with our parents in the Bay Area.
Sorry. When I was living at home with our parents in the Bay Area.
Well, we spent a lot of money in the Bay Area at certain points in our life.
And now, even last year, I don't think I spent that much money here in our little small town.
Where would you spend it?
This year, maybe I did, but I think I have this fear that I'm going to look and see that I spent like $40,000 a year. And, oh, am I high maintenance now? Maybe I'm not going to be able to be on a sabbatical because I'm just too much more spendy than I used to be. Even though I know that those things are not true, and even though I know I have enough money, there's for some reason a barrier to actually seeing how much money I have, which then prevents me from saving more money if I needed to.
I relate to that, Sammie, because I will have those moments where I'm like, panic attack. Am I about to go down to zero? And actually, I think that's why it's good to have like a money habit when you're on a sabbatical, where you are just checking in, looking at your savings, looking at your net worth. Because for me, when I do have those moments, like going in and looking at the numbers, I know, like I have a specific number in my head, which is essentially, I think it would take me 3 months to find a job. I think it would take me 3 months to find another corporate job, I should say. And I would want to give myself enough time to interview and find that role if my bank account went down to that number. But oftentimes what ends up happening is I might be a little bit nervous because the number is going down, but I'll redo the math. And then you remember when I was leaving my job and I was trying to think about taking time off, I came to you and I was like, if I bring down my expenses, especially if I move back home, I could live 10 years off of this money. And so there's two things there. Knowing your numbers is really good. And also in that case, it gave me the incentive to make a couple moves that lowered my lifestyle cost so that I could actually make that runway extend longer.
I like what you said about setting an account balance. That's almost like a number where if you reach that number, maybe start looking for a job. Because then you have multiple flags to yourself to start looking for a job that are not waiting for the last minute. So it kind of adds that level of comfort to this whole financial aspect of the sabbatical.
Exactly. And this is one place where we and Forbes can agree, because they also said, check the money that you have saved up, make sure you're setting yourself up well for your sabbatical, and reflect on what that means for you. A part of that too, Sammie, for me, was also having a specific time period, in my case, a year, where I knew I wasn't going to look for a job, I wasn't going to interview for a job. I was like, I am committing to not moving back into full employment during this time.
This is a great point, Michelle, and it is a hard one for me. I think we think it would be ideal to have a job lined up for 3 or 4 months out, and then we get to have our sabbatical, and we also get to be relaxed because we have a job lined up. And it never works like that. I know with my current job, once I got the job, I really wanted to be like, hey, I'll start work in 5 months or 6 months. And of course, that's not really an option. People aren't really posting jobs that are going to be available in half a year or a year. So I was like, you know what? No big deal. I'll take 1 month off. That'll be plenty of time to recharge. And I found that month was just so busy. I was planning, I was packing. I did not get to have the break that I was hoping that I would have. And I didn't get to relax. But at the same time, when I was relaxing, I felt bad because I felt like I should be doing other things that should be preparing for my job. It just wasn't a true break. It wasn't the true break that I thought I would get if I had a month off.
Exactly. I remember that, Sammie. I remember seeing you go to the gym at a cycling class, come back, go meet your coworkers, try to do call your banks, figure out all your financial stuff. We're moving, we're packing, you're trying to figure out rent for our new place. There were so many things that we had to figure out. And it just, I think, puts a lot of pressure on taking time off if you already have something set up. I'm not saying taking time off between jobs isn't nice. Mm-hmm. For sure, there's a strong luxury and you should ask for that if you're switching jobs. But I think it's a different vibe than a sabbatical. And Sammie, I think another part of that, which I think is so important, actually a reason why it's nice to have a few months off for a sabbatical, is I wish someone had told me this, but you need to deprogram from the work schedule when you start to have your sabbatical.
I remember this about you, Michelle, because I remember you felt like you had to be working that 40-hour week or you weren't doing anything, but it's like, what would you work on for 40 hours?
No, it's so true. I was beating myself up a lot because we were doing the podcast. I was hanging out with my parents, spending time with you, reading books. I was happy. Like I was enjoying the things that I was doing, but I always felt this overwhelming sense of guilt because one, nothing I was doing was earning money. So it didn't feel like I was a productive person of society. And two, I was used to the 9 to 5, your boss is making sure you're working 8 hours a week, 40-hour schedule, which is so arbitrary. In reality, I've read about this. I remember Charlie Gilkey talks about this in Start Finishing, how really we have like 2 ideal flow states in a day, like 90-minute flow states. An 8-hour workday is, you know this, Sammie, insane to try to pack so much stuff into, and you don't need to do that when you're taking time off.
It's so true, Michelle. And we are people who read the 4-hour work week. So we should know that these super long work weeks are not what we want. But at the same time, I know that would happen to me too.
That was another issue I had with the Forbes piece that we read. One of the advice was plan to grow personally and professionally. I'm not saying that you can't want to grow or improve yourself. Those are things that we really value here at Build a Wealthy Spirit. But I think a sabbatical is best when there's almost no goal in mind, when you can enjoy it and just go with however you feel. You're listening to your body, you're listening to your mind, but you're not like, okay, I can finally take that sales course so that I'm a better worker after this. And I can also take that writing course so that I can go back and I can write all these professional sounding emails and maybe I can get a better job. No. Once again, you're going to turn your sabbatical into a job, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid here. But I'm curious to know, Sammie, when you take your sabbatical, what are some things that you're thinking about doing?
Oh, Michelle, I've been keeping a list. Number 1 thing is sleep.
Oh, okay, this is underrated. I think everybody should just turn their alarm off as soon as they start a sabbatical, depending on your lifestyle, and just sleep for a week, because we are all underslept.
I literally can't think of many periods in my life where you could put me in a dark room during the daytime for like probably 15 minutes, maybe even less, where I wouldn't fall asleep.
Not even a dark room, a train with bright fluorescent lighting. I've seen it many times.
I genuinely think I have been sleep deprived for a majority of my life. I will say after PA school, I took about 6 months off before I started my fellowship. And I do think I actually got enough sleep during that time period. And I just remember it being so blissful. And that, if I had a sabbatical, that would be my number 1 goal. Like if I accomplished only one thing during the sabbatical, it would be to get enough sleep.
I love that. You know what's funny? I say I'm a night owl, and I am. I definitely feel a creative burst at nighttime. But when I was, especially when I was purely on my sabbatical, I didn't have any morning. I didn't have like morning meetups with my writings group, and I just didn't set my alarm. What I noticed, especially because my blinds are never that great, is that my body adjusted to like natural daylight. Like I would wake up earlier, like closer to like 6:37 during the summer when the sun came out earlier. And I would just like slowly adjust to what the world was doing, which I feel like is so natural. And it was like such a beautiful thing. Like I was surprised by that because I thought for sure I would just sleep in every single day because I am a night person and I do enjoy doing night things.
The second thing I would do, which I know is cliche, I would exercise every day.
How is that cliche? I think it's only cliche to you because you love exercising.
I think anytime I get free time, the first thing I want to do is exercise. And I do think that if I went on a sabbatical, I would want to exercise an hour a day, or maybe 45 minutes. Just really get to exercise a lot. And I would love to be like so type A about it and have like a chest strap and track my heart rate and track my workouts, and then also do like a variety of workouts like yoga and stretching and muscle building and endurance exercises. I think if there were 2 things that I could do on the sabbatical, I would love to just go deep into exercise. And I'm no meathead. I'm no athlete. I just really like to exercise.
The thing is, guys, if you think Sammie's being crazy with her dreams, she already bought the chest strap. Like, she does this. She tries to make this happen in her current lifestyle. So I fully believe that, Sammie. Is there anything else that you would do or that you imagine you would like to do on a sabbatical?
Well, throwback to Nick Gray's episode.
Shout
I
out.
do want to host 2-hour cocktail parties, mocktail parties in my case, and just build relationships in general. You know, multiple people had told me that my voicemail box was full, including the Mayo Clinic where I'm going to get my thyroid removed. And they were pretty much like, you need to empty your voicemail box. And so I was going through my voicemail box, and it's so funny when I look at these different time periods of my life. As soon as I started working in Family Med, there's like no voicemails from friends. There's no voicemails from people I'm close to. It's all just like work-related voicemails. At my old job, there were so many voicemails where they were calling me to come into work because they're short. They wanted me to pick up an extra shift. And then also just like those recruiter voicemails, but no like friends. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I have spent the past, 6-7 years just working and grinding. And yes, I get to hang out with people, but I'm really not doing that as much as I like.
Yeah, my only voicemail, I think, is from our friend Josina when she was just calling to check in. So just hearing about your voicemail gives me anxiety.
I also would love to take some classes, and I don't want to copy my sister Michelle, but
everybody says that. I don't care.
She took some awesome classes that I think I would love, like the Small Bets course, where she learned about pursuing your creative products and just throwing it out there. And writing, I also love to write, so I'd love to take a writing course. Yesterday when we were sitting outside, we were talking about maybe a bird watching course.
Oh. As a bird swooped by, and Sammie... Here's the thing, a side note. Sammie is not a bird watcher. She watches the birds. The woman has a fear of birds. But I feel like you should double it down and just make it a hobby, because you're so aware of birds all the time anyway that you may as well also be like, listen to that, blue jay.
I do think that, like, I'm not sure if bird watching is something I want to get into to kind of just maybe try to control my phobia and my fear of birds. But I do feel like if I got into bird watching, I would know all the calls. I would know all the different types of birds. It would be a whole little avenue to explore that I haven't explored. I could also maybe conquer my bird fear, or at least know the enemy.
Sammie's like Batman when he goes into that cave and he's like with all those bats that are like his worst fear, and then he comes out as Batman. That's Sammie. She's bird woman. At the end of this,
I really don't want to be bird woman. That would be my literal nightmare.
It'll be me like, Sammie, you must confront your fear. And then I trap you in a cave with birds. Honestly, that's like torture. I would never do that to you.
Thank you.
But I love that. I mean, you love to learn. You love growing your mind. And I think that I'm the same way. And that was something I loved doing when I had time off, was just like listening to books. I read the most books in my sabbatical just because I had the time and I could just pursue anything that caught my interest. So I love all of those ideas.
Ooh, important one.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to clean.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to clean. The other day, I got some containers for my work to organize my drawers. And I just came back from work and I just felt like I was one of those TikTok videos where they open all the wrapping and you hear the little sounds of them putting in the drawers. It's like, and I put in my Listerine mints, I put in my Altoid mints, organize my masks. And I'm like, I could literally do this all day.
She actually could.
I have no other goals in life. Like, I could just do this kind of stuff all day long and I would be 100% at peace.
See, Sammie, that's the thing I love. Like, there are things that we love to do that we can just indulge in, like these hobbies that we have without the goal of turning it into a job or making money or becoming a better worker. And I love the ones you shared because they're very specific to you. I don't think I was like super into cleaning when I was on my sabbatical. But I will say I was able to maintain a cleaner home, which I did enjoy.
Yes.
Takeaways.
Takeaways for this week's episode. Number 1, identify your blockers. Sometimes it's good to know what is preventing you from taking the sabbatical so that you can open your mind.
And you're not alone. Sammie, I've heard from so many people who have said, I am so ready to take time off work. I prepared my finances. I've thought about this. And I just can't take the plunge. So I want you to know that it's normal. I was personally fired, so I can't even give you advice. But I do think that once you are able to do it, you hit the water, you feel that cool deepness, you can't breathe, but then you pop out. I obviously haven't been diving, but it's that moment when you are coming out and you have that breath of fresh air and you were like, you know what? I was scared, but this was good for me.
Takeaway number 2, prepare your finances. Even if you feel like you probably have enough money, even if you're not sure if you have enough money, take a look at how much you have and take a look at how much you need. It can be so easy to avoid that.
Exactly, Sammie. And also, if you can, pick a period of time where you know you're just not going to look for another job, where you're not going to try to monetize your time. Give yourself a true sabbatical. We don't agree with Forbes. We don't think you need to do the sabbatical where you'll become a better worker.
Nope.
We want you to enjoy it. We want you to design it so that it's exactly what you want. And maybe you'll have to try a couple things. Maybe you have to see what resonates with you. But I think that the temptation to find a job is so hard. I mean, Sammie, how many people offered me a job my first year of my sabbatical? Like, it was kind of insane.
It was like people just wanted the woman to work.
Something about my face says, give me a job. People, I would even, like, even when I lied, like somebody we met, and I was like, yeah, I work in sales. And he was like, I need an assistant. I was like, I literally just told you I have a job.
How can you tell?
But I do think there were times where I was tempted. Because someone would reach out on LinkedIn, or actually a lot of times it was like a friend or something that I'd want to help out. But I realized I was like, no, like if I was going to work, I would just go back to sales. Like that's where my skills are and where I could make the most money. I was glad I gave myself a little bit of space to just say no to those things. And I was like, you know what? If in a year I want to come back to this, I will. But then I didn't.
And lastly, start making a list of the things that you'd want to do if you were on a sabbatical. It doesn't have to be hard and fast. It's just a list of ideas of things that maybe you'd be interested in.
I definitely put sleep at the top of the list. Let us know if there's anything we missed. We'd love to hear from you and what your perfect sabbatical would look like. Or maybe you want to freewheel it like me. Let us know. buildawealthyspirit.com.
Community time!
Sammie, speaking of being a busy bee and needing time off work, I want to talk about literal bees.
Oh, God.
You know what I'm talking about.
We're talking about the swarm.
Okay, guys, listen. We woke up one day. Sammie looks out the window. There's this tree outside our window. Mind you, this is a desert.
We live in the desert.
Yeah, it's not like this robust, leafy green tree. But she's like, oh, there's kind of a lot of bees there. And we look, and we're like, 1, 2, 3. There's tons. The whole tree is covered in bees.
Yep.
And then we're like, let's go look outside and see.
We thought maybe we'd find a honeycomb.
We thought we'd find a honeycomb or something, or whatever you call those bee homes. We step outside.
It's like a swarm. There were, I want to say thousands. I don't know if I'm being dramatic here, but there were like thousands of bees and they were all buzzing and it was causing like a lot of noise. And as soon as we went out there and we heard that, I'm like, I've heard this on cartoons and I'm going back inside.
Oh, heck no.
If these things start following me, it's going to be crazy.
I'm no Winnie the Pooh, okay? I know danger when I see it. But the crazy thing is, by the end of the day, they were gone. And so I became very curious. Both of us became very curious about bees.
Yes.
And we have really gone deep in the bee world.
Turns out bees start to swarm when something is going on with the queen. Either the queen is maybe sick, she's not going to be able to do the queenly duties, or they think that she's an incompetent queen. I didn't know bees had so many thoughts,
Literally.
And so then they start to swarm.
These bees need a sabbatical, if you ask me. Sammie and I are a little different. I was Googling things like, what temperature do bees die? Look, I'm not proud of it. But it's getting really hot. And I was like, maybe we're in 100-degree streaks right now. So I was like, how long can these bees actually survive?
Soon it's going to be like 118, 120. And are the bees going to survive that?
No, they do die at 118. But at 100 degrees, they're like honey homes, like the wax melts. So that's probably why they don't actually live there. I don't know where they live. But it's been interesting, though, because we've actually seen as it's gotten hotter, the bees have come earlier in the day.
Yes.
Like they're not around when it's 100 degrees. So these bees are pretty smart.
Yeah, the bees are very smart. Yeah, they've been coming earlier and earlier. They come to the tree, they pollinate, and they leave.
Yeah. Busy bees. Side note, bees' knees. They don't have knees.
Side note, Beyonce bees.
Queen bee.
Yes. It made a lot more sense. Like, when they were swarming because the whole Jay-Z thing, they were worried about their queen.
Mhm.
And it makes a lot of sense because that's something that actually happened. And in looking this up, I saw this picture of this queen bee that got stuck in a car. And then the car was covered in bees because the bees were trying to reach their queen.
That'd be my nightmare.
No pun intended.
We have a couple shout outs this week. One, Kara Minder. My friend Kara Minder reviewed our podcast on Apple Podcast.
Thank you, Carminder.
Thank you so much. We so appreciate it. Kara Minder wrote, "What a truly infectious spirit these two have. Best part of my day is when I get to listen to them." Thank you so much, Kara Minder.
Wow.
I agree.
Love it.
I love listening to us too.
And I got to give a shout out to Julie and Melissa because they sent me some Netflix and book recommendations for my recovery after my upcoming surgery. So thank you. I am excited to check those out.
Yes, they sent some great books, Sammie. And so I think we're going to be doing a lot of reading and Netflix watching and honestly just enjoying being in a real city for a little bit. We'd love to hear from you guys too. If you have any suggestions, if you have any ideas about sabbaticals, if you just want to say hi, you can find us buildawealthyspirit.com. You can email us buildawealthyspirit@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you.
And most importantly, be sure to join us next time as we put down the rule book and we rethink the status quo.